This is for all my fellow non-cavers that don't do this crazy shit. Okay? We don't have time to be doing crazy shit like this. Life is already hard enough, all right? Why would I want to go 1,000 feet down in some cave and get stuck and really be stressed out? So for all my non-cavers, this is for y'all, man. Dedicated to y'all. We're going to watch the footage and we're going to sit back in our chairs on our couch and we're going to be safe watching this. Let's roll the footage. Let's go, man.
Today, we will be looking at two horrifying caving stories that went horribly wrong. The first incident was entirely avoidable. The cavers had already survived a near-death
it's called Don't Go. Fuck.
experience, one that should have sent them back, but instead, they pushed deeper, straight into a nightmare that defies human comprehension. And just when you think it can't get worse, the next story delivers something even darker. A life or death situation ending in the ultimate betrayal by the companion he trusted. As always, viewer discretion is advised. On January 25th,
Pressing the
1986,
limits.
4 cave explorers gathered for a caving expedition that they were planning for a very long time. Parker's Pit Cave draws experienced spelunkers from across the Midwest, with its technical challenges and deep vertical drops. The cave system requires advanced rappelling skills and specialized equipment to navigate safely. Unlike horizontal caves where one can walk or crawl through passages, vertical caves like Parker's Pit demand absolute precision in rope work and equipment rigging. On that January morning, the 4 arrived at the cave entrance, equipped with what they believed was the proper gear for the challenging descent ahead. The group included experienced cave explorers who had tackled similar vertical systems before. But experience means nothing when basic safety procedures are abandoned.
Exactly.
The team prepared to descend into the depths of Parker's Pit. Their first major obstacle was the upper bound, a vertical drop of 22 feet, 6.7 meters, that required careful rappelling technique to navigate safely. The upper bound represented a deadly hazard waiting to claim its next victim. A fall from 22 feet, 6.7 meters, onto solid limestone could shatter bones, crush skulls, and snap spines like twigs.
Imagine?
2 of them successfully completed their descent down the upper bound, using proper rappelling technique and safety equipment. They reached the bottom of the pit safely and prepared to continue deeper into the cave system, unaware of the disaster that was about to unfold above them. The 3rd began his descent, but he had made a critical and potentially fatal error in rigging his rappelling equipment. He was using a carabiner brake bar device, a common piece of caving equipment designed to control the speed of descent down a rope. When properly rigged, this device allows to descend smoothly and safely, with complete control over their rate of descent. However, proper rigging requires the rope to follow a specific path through the carabiner and around the brake bar. The rope must pass through the carabiner, over the brake bar, and then back down through the carabiner again. This configuration creates the friction needed to control the descent and prevent a dangerous free fall. Unfortunately, the 3rd in line catastrophically failed to complete this rigging sequence. His rope went through the carabiner and over the brake bar, but he had neglected the crucial final step of threading it back down through the carabiner. This incomplete rigging meant that his brake bar device was essentially useless, providing no friction or control over his descent. The deadly trap was set. Death waited 22 feet, 6.7 meters below on the limestone floor.
Limestone!
As he stepped off the edge to begin his rappel, the improperly rigged equipment immediately failed to provide any braking action. The rope slipped freely through his device, and he realized with pure terror that he was falling.
He's done.
The cave walls rushed past him in a blur as he plummeted through the darkness with a sickening whoosh of displaced air.
Whoosh.
Gravity seized his body and accelerated him downward at an ever-increasing speed, while the others watched helplessly in absolute horror. His body struck the limestone floor with a loud impact. The rest of the team was ready to...
The carabiner bar wasn't done properly. The last part of it. That's cold-blooded, man.
Their companion's broken body sprawled on the limestone, and they rushed towards him. When the other reached the impact site, they discovered something that defied all logic and expectation. The fallen cave explorer was conscious and moving. Somehow, impossibly, He had survived the catastrophic fall that should have ended his life.
Thank the
By some
Lord.
impossible stroke of fortune, he had survived what should have been a fatal accident. He struggled.
And you know what? It's time to climb right back up and get the fuck up out of that cave. That's what I'm doing.
His feet.
If I get that
Shaken,
chance, I'm
but
out of
apparently
there.
uninjured. His survival was nothing short of miraculous. However, the psychological trauma was immediate and severe. His hands shook
You think?
uncontrollably as the reality of what had happened sank in.
Time to
He
go.
had just experienced his own near death and was not in the right mental frame to continue. At that point, the wise decision would have been to head back.
Yes!
However, in a decision that bordered on insanity, the group chose to continue
You
deeper
can't be
into Parker's
serious.
pit rather than immediately evacuating to seek medical attention. The spelunker who had just
See, this is why you can't feel sorry for them when they do get injured or killed up in this bitch. You mean to tell me you want to continue to keep going further in the cave? You got me.
survived what should have been a fatal fall, insisted he was fine, and wanted to continue with the planned exploration. This decision demonstrated the dangerous mindset that kills cavers.
Exactly.
The belief that surviving one close call means you are invincible. They descended deeper into the
Too
cave
much
system,
adrenaline.
where the passages became more technical and the dangers multiplied. The cave system's most notorious feature awaited them deeper underground, a passage known as the Z-Bend.
Oh, you don't
This
want to do the
formation is no less
Z-Bend.
than a nightmare, a series of tight constrictions that forced explorers to contort their bodies through spaces barely large enough for human passage.
That don't even look like it can be done, man. Your body don't bend like that, motherfucker.
Bend had earned its fearsome reputation by trapping people in positions where they could neither advance nor retreat. The first one entered feet first
Feet
and on
first
his
and
belly.
shit.
He wriggled his way through the passage and moved towards the first sharp bend. As he did so, he warned others about how tight it was. The second one in the group followed behind. He also went feet first, however. He went in lying on his back. When he entered the Z-Bend, he immediately encountered the passage's deadly nature. The limestone walls seemed to grip his body, holding him in place as he tried to work his way through the constricted space. With each
That shit hurts me just to look at, man. You see this shit?
the rock seemed to tighten its grip, compressing his chest and making breathing increasingly difficult. Within moments, just at the first sharp turn, he realized he was trapped.
You're fucked.
The limestone had him in its deadly embrace, and panic began to set in as he discovered he could neither move forward nor backward through the constricted passage. His situation quickly became life-threatening. The Z-Bend compressed his chest, making each breath a struggle against the crushing pressure of solid rock. Panic made the situation worse. As his muscles tensed with fear, his body expanded slightly, making the already impossibly tight passage even more constricting. The stone walls that had seemed merely tight now felt like they were actively trying to crush the life from his body.
You ain't
The
got to worry
others
about
could
my
hear him
body. I ain't
cry
doing
for
it.
help. Time was running out. If they could not extract him quickly, the Z-Bend would claim another victim. The rescue attempt began immediately, but the confined space of the Z-Bend made every movement dangerous for both the victim and his would-be rescuers. One of them positioned himself behind the trapped man, while the other worked from ahead, both risking their own entrapment in the deadly passage. The limestone seemed to fight their every effort. Each attempt to shift the trapped man's position met resistance from the unyielding rock walls. The rescuers themselves were forced into awkward, uncomfortable positions that
Man, I'm getting claustrophobia just by watching this shit, man. Z's, bends, and shit. Come
to trap
on,
them
man.
as well in the stone maze. The trapped victim's breathing grew more labored with each passing minute as the rock continued to compress his chest. His face was pale and drawn as oxygen deprivation began to take its toll. Inch by agonizing inch, they worked the trapped guy through the deadly passage. Every small movement was a victory against the limestone that seemed determined to claim another victim. The rock scraped against flesh and tore at clothing as they forced their way through spaces that seemed too small for human passage. Their trapped friend's strength was almost gone when they finally managed to work him through the worst of the constriction. His body slipped through the narrowest point of the Z-Bend, just as his endurance reached its limit. A few more minutes, and the passage would have claimed his life through exhaustion and oxygen deprivation. The successful extraction marked the end of what had become a nightmare expedition into Parker's pit. Two potentially fatal incidents in a single caving trip represented an extraordinary concentration of deadly encounters that should have left at least one of them dead. The group finally began their retreat from the cave system, climbing back up the same passages that had nearly claimed 2 lives. The psychological toll of the day's events was evident in all 4 of them as they made their way back to the surface.
And you know what? I bet you they still went back another day to go through a goddamn cave. That right there is the reason why I don't do this shit.
In this next story, what started as a routine descent turned into a brutal fight for survival, made worse by a betrayal no one saw coming. The hills of Texas hide many secrets beneath their surface. One of the most dangerous lies just outside Wimberley in Hayes County, where Jacob's Well opens into the earth like a deceptive invitation. What appears as a peaceful spring-fed pool masks one of the deadliest underwater cave systems in America. On the evening of November 23rd, 1983, 2 young men would learn this truth too late, leading towards an unimaginable betrayal. Richard Patton was 22 years old and passionate about diving. He and his companion were both students in an advanced diving class at Southwest Texas State University. Their instructors described them as extremely experienced and very intelligent divers. They knew the risks of cave diving and had the skills to handle most underwater challenges. But Jacob's Well was different from other dive sites. Signs posted around the spring warned visitors that diving was strictly prohibited. The warnings existed for good reason. Over the previous decades, numerous divers had lost their lives in the cave's dark passages. The spring had earned a deadly reputation among the diving community. Despite the warnings, Patton and his friend decided to explore the forbidden cave that Wednesday evening.
Of course they did.
They arrived at Jacob's Well around 8:30 p.m., equipped with standard scuba gear and underwater lights. The surface of the water looked calm and inviting in the fading daylight. The 2 divers entered the water and began their descent into the cave system. Jacob's Well drops straight down through limestone walls, creating a vertical shaft that extends deep into the earth. As they descended, the natural light from the surface faded, leaving only their artificial lights to guide the way. As they descended into the dark limestone shaft, neither diver attached a guideline to mark their path back to the surface. This critical safety measure, standard practice in cave diving, would have provided them with a direct route to the entrance no matter how disoriented they became in the maze of passages below. Without this lifeline, they were diving blind into one of the most dangerous underwater cave systems in the world. At approximately 90 feet, 27 meters below the surface, they reached a critical point in the cave system. Here, a small passage led deeper into the underground network. This passage had been sealed with a metal grate in 1979 after rescue teams failed to recover a body from beyond that point. The authorities had installed the barrier to prevent other divers from venturing into the most dangerous part of the cave. But when Patton and his companion arrived at the 90-foot mark, they discovered the metal grate was gone. Someone had removed or destroyed the safety barrier, leaving the deadly passage open once again. Faced with the open passage, the 2 divers made a decision that would prove catastrophic. They decided to continue deeper into the cave system. The passage ahead was too narrow for them to swim through while wearing their bulky scuba tanks on their backs. To proceed, they removed their tanks and began...
I would be worried that the rock itself would just puncture your oxygen tank. What the hell are y'all doing?
Pushing the heavy equipment ahead of them through the tight space. They kept the breathing hoses in their mouths, drawing air from the tanks as they moved forward. This technique, while risky, allowed experienced divers to navigate spaces too small for normal scuba diving. The limestone walls pressed in around them as they squeezed deeper into the narrow tunnel. Every movement had to be calculated and careful. The passage seemed to grow tighter with each push forward, the rough stone scraping against their equipment and bodies. Their lights cast eerie shadows on the cave walls, creating a maze of rock formations that all looked identical in the darkness. Then, disaster struck. The passage was more difficult than they expected. As they worked their way through the narrow limestone tunnel, Patton's tank became wedged against the cave walls. Despite their efforts, they could not free the trapped equipment. The tank was stuck fast, and their air supply was now divided between them. Both divers made the decision to abandon the jammed tank. They would have to share the remaining air supply and retreat to the surface immediately. This technique, called buddy breathing, required them to pass the breathing regulator back and forth, taking turns breathing from the single tank. With their air supply limited and time running out, Patton and his companion began their emergency ascent toward the cave entrance. In the dark, confusing maze of underwater passages, navigation became critical. One wrong turn could mean the difference between life and death. But in their haste and with their attention focused on sharing the dwindling air supply, the two divers made a fatal error. Instead of following the passage back to the main entrance, they swam up into what cave divers call a blind chimney. This dead-end passage led upward but had no connection to the surface. As they ascended the false passage, their shared air supply continued to diminish. When they reached the top of the chimney, they discovered their mistake. Above them was solid rock, not the opening to Jacob's well. They were trapped in a dead end with almost no air remaining. With seconds left before their air ran out completely, the unthinkable happened. Faced with the choice between certain death for both of them or trying to save himself, Patton's companion made the most agonizing decision a person can face underwater. In what must have felt like the ultimate betrayal to both men, he abandoned his friend in the blind chimney. The companion left Patton alone in the dark, dead-end passage and swam back down.
Dude, that is insane. What would y'all have done? This is exactly why we don't do shit like this. I mean, you got to understand though too, probably panicked and just, you know, the primal instinct just kicked in. But that is the most horrible situation, man. One of the worst, man.
To find the correct route to the surface. It was a desperate gamble that went against every instinct of partnership and loyalty that divers depend on. But with their air supply exhausted and both men facing death, someone had to try to reach the surface to call for help. Fighting against panic and oxygen deprivation, he managed to locate the proper route and swam to safety. The companion surfaced at Jacob's well, gasping for air and calling for help. But Richard Patton remained trapped in the underwater dead end, with no air supply and no way to reach the surface. Search and rescue teams arrived quickly, but it was too late to save Patton.
Not quick enough.
The young diver had drowned in the blind chimney, another victim of Jacob's Well's deadly maze. On Thursday morning, November 24th, recovery divers brought his body to the surface. The tragedy made headlines across Texas. Newspapers reported the story of the experienced diver who had lost his life in the Forbidden Cave. The Austin American-Statesman ran an article titled, "Divers Feel Deadly Fascination for Treachery of Jacob's Well," highlighting the spring's dangerous attraction for underwater explorers. Cave diving experts who analyzed the incident identified several factors that contributed to Patton's death. The missing safety grate had removed a crucial barrier that was installed specifically to prevent divers from entering the most dangerous part of the cave system. Without this warning, the passage appeared navigable to experienced divers. The decision to remove their tanks and push them through the narrow passage was a recognized technique among advanced cave divers, but it significantly increased the risk of equipment problems. When Patton's tank became jammed, it created an emergency situation that required perfect execution to survive. Most critically, the divers had not used a guideline to mark their route through the cave system. Guidelines are considered essential safety equipment for cave diving because they provide a reliable path back to the entrance. In the dark, disorienting environment of an underwater cave, even experienced divers can become confused about direction and distance. If Patton and his companion had installed a guideline at the beginning of their dive, they would have been able to follow it directly back to the entrance instead of swimming into the deadly blind chimney. Patton's death was not an isolated incident. Jacob's well had already claimed numerous lives over the previous
Well,
day.
you know what? They ain't gonna claim my life because I ain't doing it. Just like my fellow non-cavers out there. Let me know what you would do in that situation if you went down with your boy. That is crazy, man. That's even unthinkable. It's unfathomable. You know what I'm saying? Let me know in the comments down below. And we got many more gone wrong moments coming your way. But I'll be in touch. One love.